Hey guys! So, last time we did the top 10 playable moments in Final Fantasy. Those were moments that were decent on the story side, but were mostly stuff that was just fun to play through. Now we're going to talk about strictly story moments. Cutscenes, dialogue, stuff that is mostly non-playable, stuff that plays out the same for everybody who plays it. So these are my top 10 favorite story moments in Final Fantasy. Number 10, the perfect ending from Final Fantasy X-2. Now look, I prefer Final Fantasy X's ending, but I have to admit, as much as I'm a sucker for a good sad ending, I'm also a sucker for a good happy ending, and I think after all the stress that you went through to get the perfect ending in X-2, having that cute little scene, and not just like the cutscene where you're having that's beautiful, that's a great Hollywood moment, but the perfect ending, if you get 100%, where those two talk to each other, where Tidus and Yuna talk to each other in Zanarkand, that sweet little moment, it's so subtle, but it's such a nice touch, and it hits me right here. Number 9, Vivi learning the truth from Final Fantasy IX. Pretty much Vivi's entire character could probably be one entire entry on this list, but my moment that I think sticks out the most is when he goes to the Black Mage Village and learns basically what the Black Mages are and what he is, and learns about the ticking clock hanging over his head. And it's such a character-defining moment, and Vivi has those moments of doubt, but he stands up to this and says, I'm not going to let this define me. I'm not going to be completely drowned in sorrow. I'm going to live what life I have to the fullest. And it's a heartbreaking moment where because he's shocked at first, obviously. He's basically a kid. But everything else that comes after that, I'm just like, oh my god. Vivi is one of the best characters ever written in any video game. So, yeah, this moment hits me pretty hard. Number 8, Galuf's death in Final Fantasy V. I gotta admit, I really think that this scene gets underplayed severely by the fan base. Because, when we think of tragic deaths, we think of, that one. But I gotta say, this was pretty hard too. I mean, after all the effort you went through with him, to have him just suddenly freaking die, and to die a hero's death, no less. I mean, they're always dying heroes' death. I know that's not really unique, but Galuf especially saves his friend and matches up to X's death, and after basically 2/3 of the game, he perishes for good. And, it's pretty heartbreaking. I mean, everyone, and the thing is, you've seen the memes, everyone tried to save him, but no, he's gone. So it gets underplayed, but I think it's just as poignant. Number 7, the Sending from Final Fantasy X. This is one of the most referenced FMVs in the entire franchise, even to this day, because this is such an amazing moment, not just from an artistic sense, but from a story sense as well. When you really begin to feel the weight of what Sin can do. I mean, obviously we've had incidents with Sin. We've seen him destroy cities. But here, finally, at Kilika, we're actually seeing, the amount of devastation and the loss of life. And the fact that Yuna has to bear that weight on herself to guide these souls to the far plane. It's so beautiful. The water dancing and the magic and the fireflies going on. It's just a beautifully, it's an artistically magnificent scene. But also from a story scope, it's just, man, this really hits you over the head with what exactly the stakes are. So, I love it so much. Number 6, Celes's attempted suicide in Final Fantasy VI. Now, to be fair, this one you might not have seen if you managed to save Cid, but I know a lot of us, myself included, didn't know that you actually could save Sid our first time playing, and ended up seeing this scene. And oh my god, it's one of the darkest and most depressing scenes in the entire series. I mean, we're talking like character deaths are always sad, but this is not a character death. This is a woman who believes she is literally the last person alive. All of her friends have died, or as far as she knows. And she's like, you know what, I don't have the strength to carry on anymore, I'm just gonna end it myself. She fails, of course, for plot reasons, but holy crap, what a moment. And kind of a risky moment in some senses to throw in a game like that, but if you haven't seen this before, one of these days when you're playing FF6, let Sid die and watch it play out. It's pretty damn poignant. Number 5, Cecil's redemption in Final Fantasy IV. Now, if you listen to my Thanksgiving pod, you already know that Cecil is my favorite character in the series. I love his story, I love everything that he goes through, and his redemption here, I think, everyone says, you know, well, this is kind of where his character growth ends, and to an extent, they're right, but it's still an amazing moment, because I don't think they've really ever investigated that before. There's always been, whenever you have a character who does bad things and then becomes good, there are reasons that, you know, he wasn't that bad. Like, even in Final Fantasy V with Kain, or in 4 with Kain, there was the mind control angle. But in this case, Cecil didn't have that option. He knew what he was doing. He was following orders, but he was taking lives, destroying cities, ruining the peace, all for what he thought was the best course of action at the time. He trusted his king, and now he has to deal with the consequences. So that redemption, there isn't, it's not a hollow gesture. It's not a, oh shucks, that's okay, you weren't really being yourself. No, it's a dramatic moment where he has to undo everything, literally resetting himself to 0 to move forward to, and incidentally, just so we're clear, if it isn't obvious by the story context, what happens in Mount Ordeals, that's the beginning of his redemption. His road and journey as a paladin is all part of his redemption. Everything he does as a paladin from that point forward is to make up for what he did as a Dark Knight. They certainly could have investigated that more in the game, I'll admit, but just be clear, this is the beginning of his redemption journey, not the end. Number 4, The Bridge Confession from Final Fantasy VIII. Okay, there's a lot of great story moments in 8 when you can be bothered to sit down and really pick it apart. But the ones that I think hit me over the head the most are, of course, the date scene and this, The Bridge Confession. Now, while I had to choose between the two, I think The Bridge Confession is a little bit stronger. I mean, you have other moments with them. You have, you know, the ballroom scene, you have the moments in space. All these are great moments of love, but I think the one that hits me the hardest is The Bridge Confession, when Rinoa isn't even in the picture. She's there, but she's in a coma. And this is where we really see Squall finally, after 3 discs, open up and talk about his feelings. Of course he's doing it when she's not awake, and I'll admit that's kind of hilarious, but it shows you that, you know, this guy, he's been unavailable, and you understand at this point the baggage he's been dealing with, to an extent at the very least, but now we see that everything he's done is a wall that he built up to protect himself, and finally somebody enters his life who's able to tear those walls down, and as soon as he's comfortable being around her, she's taken away. And that explains why Squall is so determined to set off on his own to find a way to save her, why all of a sudden, after years of just not giving a damn, of just being whatever, he's willing to fight for her, and to go on this ridiculous long shot of a quest to Estar, which might not even still be there as far as he knows, to try and save her. It's the beginning of something amazing, and really is the turning point for Squall's character. It's kind of a shame it took 3 discs to get there, I'll admit, but still, it's incredibly powerful. Number 3, the ending from Final Fantasy X. And here it is, of course, the ending. I mentioned at the beginning of this one, I think it's the better, and it's probably the best in the series. Again, maybe Final Fantasy VI takes it over. I go back and forth. 6's ending is so fantastic, and it has that long ending medley, and everyone gets a shot in. But I think at the very least, in terms of the impact of the story, it probably is the best ending. Because it had the guts to have a sad ending. Without spoiling too much, it's a sad ending, and it's not a bullshit cliffhanger like 13-2, it's just a legitimately sad ending. There's a ray of hope, but that's it. Otherwise, what happened, happened. So, I just admire the gusto. I mean, I admire them saying, you know, we always have these Hollywood schlocky happy endings, let's try something different. And they did. And I'm not saying there haven't been, you know, kind of like somber endings. Final Fantasy VII's ending comes to mind. I mean, there's that victory moment, but then there's a little bit of ambiguity. But 10 is just said, no, this is the ending I want, we're going to do it this way. So, I think it worked wonderfully. Number 2, Aerith's death from Final Fantasy VII. Everyone knew this was coming. Everyone knew this was coming. And a lot of you might be upset that it's not number 1, but I have a reason for that. But it's definitely number 2. I mean, when you think of iconic Final Fantasy moments, it doesn't get any more iconic than this. I mean, this is the death that drew people into the franchise. Like, Final Fantasy VII was a lot of folks' first Final Fantasy. And to have this moment play out right near the end of disc, right almost at the end of disc 1. Just so many young minds must have been shattered that day. I remember playing it because, you see, I played Final Fantasy VII. It was the third one I played. I played Final Fantasy VI, then 8, and then 7. And I had kind of a weird reaction to it. You see, Kate Sith, or Ketchi, rather. I always say Kate Sith, but whatever. That's how it's spelled. But no, Ketchi, you know, has the fake death, and then right after, it's like, oh, hey, I'm fine. So I was like, okay, you pry me, and to be honest, I was actually more upset with Ketchi dying, even though he didn't have much of a presence. I really liked the character. But then he came back, I'm like, okay, you know, it's fine, status quo. And because I had played 8, where, you know, Renoa was in a coma for so long, but finally she got better, I spent much of the game waiting for Aerith to come back. And even when she died, I mean, when she died, it was definitely a sad moment. I was like, oh man. But I don't think I was actually that upset about it, because I was so smart in my head, I was like, oh no, she's gonna come back. This is a Final Fantasy game, she's gonna come back. Final Fantasy games don't really kill people. I was a sweet summer child once. But no, I think it was probably around the time, you see, when you get the quest from Bugenhagen to go find that ancient key under the water, I was like, this is it, we're gonna bring her back. And then when you get that message from her about how to save the planet, I think that's when it dawned on me, oh, she's dead for good. And I think that's when I realized, oh, okay, this isn't a fake out, this is, and weirdly, I had like a delayed reaction, because that's when I got really sad. I'm like, oh my god, she's gone. So that's my my story of how I experienced that death. Please leave your experience in the comments. I'm certain you will. Number 1, the ending medley from Final Fantasy VI. Okay. You want to talk about how to do an ending. This is how you do it. Every character has their own musical accompaniment playing, their own little scene as they're fleeing Kefka's tower. You get a complete curtain call of the cast, along with key moments, little tropey moments that define who they are, so you remember the adventures you had with them. Then you've got this hectic escape from the crumbling Kefka's tower, and the Esper form of Terra flying, guiding you to safety. All of a sudden, as magic fades from the world forever, she loses her powers and starts collapsing and falls through the sky. Setzer guns the ship to try and catch her. Then we cut away. And then we're seeing the two teenagers that she was watching, one of them who was pregnant, Caitlin, I think it was. And just as magic is leaving the world, a new life is entering. Just a metaphor, a better symbol you could not ask for, of this ruined world starting to regain some of what it once had in the form of this child. And then we cut back to our heroes, and sure enough, Terra has been saved. And with one final cheeky line from Setzer about how this was the fastest ship after all, we cut to the credits. Holy God, this is how you do an ending. And to cap us off with that amazing airship thing, really it's Setzer's theme, is just the perfect way to end. It's this triumphant, energized ending. And that's the thing, I love a sad ending, but my God, I love a happy ending too, especially when you nail that sense of triumph. And Final Fantasy has always done that. Final Fantasy V had an amazing ending. Final Fantasy IV, an amazing ending. Final Fantasy VIII, an amazing ending, because Final Fantasy can end. Final Fantasy is such a weird thing to say, but Final Fantasy can do an ending to better than any other franchise. But Final Fantasy VI, there's just something really special about how it all comes together. Something so, dare I say, operatic to the way it all comes to the conclusion. And to me, as mean-spirited as this might sound, it's my favorite part of Final Fantasy VI is when it's over. So, that's that. And that was my list of my top 10 favorite story moments from the Final Fantasy series. And that concludes this sort of two-parter, dual list for Thanksgiving. For December, I'm gonna go easy on myself and talk about music, because I really like the music of the series, so expect maybe one or two top 10 lists discussing the music of the franchise. While you're singing your jingle bells and all that good stuff, I'll be pouring my ears over lots and lots of amazing Uematsu tracks. We'll see you next month. Take care.